A biting October wind swept off Lake Michigan, slicing through Chicago's Gold Coast with a frigid edge that promised a brutal winter. 6-year-old Zola Washington huddled against the cold limestone of a carriage house, her small frame wrapped in a jacket 2 sizes too big. Her breath plumed in the frosty air, each cloud a tiny ghost disappearing into the twilight. It had been 3 months since the quiet hum of Grandma Hattie's machines had fallen silent. 3 months since her entire world had fractured. The women from social services had visited their old apartment twice, their voices a mixture of kindness and unwavering resolve that echoed in her memory. "Zola, you can't stay here by yourself. We have to find you a safe home." But Zola remembered the stories about Jamal from 2 floors down, how they took him to a group home and he never came back to see Mrs. Rodriguez like he'd sworn he would. As dusk settled over the opulent neighborhood, Zola's weary eyes landed on a beacon of hope. The Croft Mansion's garage emitted a warm, inviting glow. Unlike the other formidable townhouses she had passed, this one seemed to breathe. Heat shimmered from within, a protective aura guarding a fleet of expensive vehicles from Chicago's unforgiving climate. Inside, Julian Croft, the 42-year-old founder of Croft Innovations, was lovingly buffing the chrome on his prized 1963 Corvette Stingray. The next day was a significant milestone in his meticulously orchestrated life. The final arrangements for his wedding to Amelia Vance, a brilliant and beautiful investment banker who had captivated him at a charity fundraiser 8 months prior. "Just you and me tomorrow, old girl," he murmured to the classic car, oblivious to the small, desperate eyes watching him from the shadows of the alley. When Julian finally departed, sealing the garage with a quiet electronic hum, Zola slipped through a loose panel in the fence she'd spotted earlier. She found a nook behind a stack of massive storage crates, creating a tiny, hidden sanctuary. It was invisible, warm, and for the first time in weeks, felt safe. Curling up on a flattened cardboard box, she clutched the faded photograph of her grandmother and whispered the prayer Grandma Hattie had taught her. "Oh, please watch over me until the sun comes up." She had no inkling that she had just found the one place in the world that would alter the course of her life. But in the growing darkness, another person was observing the Croft mansion with a much colder purpose. The following morning arrived with pale golden light filtering through the garage's high frosted windows. Zola had slept in fits, every distant siren and rustle of leaves making her heart pound. Yet, as the warmth from the heated floors seeped into her makeshift bed, she felt a profound sense of security she hadn't known in months. The garage door glided open, and Julian Croft strode in, his expensive cologne mingling with the familiar scents of leather and oil. Amelia Vance followed, her designer heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete. "Darling, you have to show me this top-secret wedding surprise you've been hinting at," Amelia cooed. Her smile, however, seemed more like a well-rehearsed expression than a genuine one. Hidden behind the crates, Zola watched as Julian's face illuminated with an almost boyish glee. He led Amelia to a vehicle shrouded by a spotless canvas cover. "Something classic for our big day," he announced, pulling the sheet away with a theatrical flourish. The restored Corvette shone like a pool of liquid silver under the recessed lighting. For a fleeting second, Amelia's expression shifted from forced delight to a sharp, calculating appraisal. "It must be very valuable," she commented, her manicured fingers tracing the curve of the fender. "It's priceless to me," Julian responded, completely missing the nuance in her question. "My father and I rebuilt this engine together when I was a teenager. After the ceremony, we'll take it for a drive up Lakeshore Drive." From her hiding place, Zola saw Amelia's reflection in the car's gleaming chrome bumper. The woman's smile was a perfect, empty curve. Something about her reminded Zola of the cashier at the corner store who always watched kids like they were about to steal something. But Julian was different. The way he spoke to his car with a gentle and affectionate tone was just like how Grandma Hattie used to talk to her houseplants. "You've been patient, haven't you, beautiful?" he whispered to the Corvette, wiping an imaginary speck of dust from its flawless hood. After they left, Zola fell into a careful rhythm. During the day, she stayed perfectly still, playing the hiding games Grandma Hattie had taught her when they used to visit Lincoln Park. It was only after nightfall that she dared to move, slipping out to the mansion's outdoor kitchen to find leftover food. She was always cautious, taking just enough to quell the ache in her stomach, never enough to raise suspicion. On her third night, while nibbling on a piece of discarded baguette, she heard Amelia's voice drifting from the kitchen window. It was sharp, laced with an anger that made Zola freeze. "The timeline is firm, Damien, right after we get back from the honeymoon." Something in that cold, hard tone reminded her of the scary movies Grandma Hattie would never let her watch. By her fifth day in the garage, Zola felt brave enough to explore during the quiet afternoon hours while Julian was occupied in his home office. She discovered that the garage's ventilation system acted as a conduit, carrying snippets of conversations from various parts of the house. Her hiding spot had become an unintentional listening post. That night, sleep was impossible. Around midnight, the soft whir of the garage door jolted her awake. Amelia slipped inside, alone, her phone pressed to her ear as if she believed she was completely unobserved. "The policy was finalized this afternoon, Damien. $50 million. Amelia's voice was as cold as the November wind, sending a shiver through Zola despite the ambient warmth. "We just need to execute the plan after the ceremony." Zola didn't understand words like policy or execute, but she understood the chilling sound of danger. It was the same tone the landlord had used when he threatened to evict them just before Grandma Hattie fell ill. "Stop worrying about the details," Amelia continued, pacing near the Corvette. "Julian is insistent on driving this ridiculous car after the reception. The timing is absolutely perfect." When Amelia finally left, Zola remained frozen behind her wall of boxes, her 6-year-old mind struggling to make sense of the fragments she had heard. The next morning offered another unsettling glimpse into Amelia's character. Through the garage's side window, Zola watched her in Julian's office, while he stepped onto the balcony to take a business call. Amelia moved with a swift, furtive purpose, using her phone to photograph documents laid out on his desk. When Julian returned carrying 2 cups of coffee, she was seated demurely, her radiant smile back in place. "You're a lifesaver for handling all these last-minute details, sweetheart," Julian said, kissing her forehead. "Anything for our future," Amelia replied, her fingers trailing possessively over the very papers she had just secretly photographed. From her concealed vantage point, Zola observed this performance with a growing sense of dread. Grandma Hattie had always told her to trust her gut feelings about people. "Your heart knows things your head hasn't figured out yet, little bird," she used to say. And at that moment, Zola's heart was sounding a silent, screaming alarm about the woman Julian was about to marry. Later, as Zola was collecting rainwater in a small plastic cup she'd found, she overheard another late-night call. "3 days, Damien. In 3 more days, everything is going to change." The absolute certainty in Amelia's voice sent a wave of ice through Zola's small body. Whatever was planned for 3 days from now, on Julian's wedding day, she knew it was something terrible. But who would ever listen to a homeless 6-year-old hiding in a stranger's garage? 3 nights before the wedding, Zola was quietly eating some crackers she had scavenged from the outdoor kitchen's trash when the garage door slid open at 2 in the morning. Her heart hammered against her ribs as Amelia entered, accompanied by a tall, lean man dressed in dark clothes. "Damien," Amelia whispered, her voice filled with a lethal satisfaction, "everything is proceeding flawlessly." Zola shrank deeper into the shadows, barely daring to breathe as the 2 strangers approached Julian's beloved Corvette. "Julian is determined to drive this damn car after the reception," Amelia explained, stroking the hood with a gesture of mock affection. "He wants to take a romantic drive up Lakeshore Drive, near that sharp curve by the North Avenue bend. You know the one overlooking the lake? Damien nodded grimly. Tight turn, no guardrail, but what if there are questions? Who would question it? Amelia's laugh was as cold and sharp as breaking ice. A $50 million life insurance policy that covers accidental death. A vintage car suffering a mechanical failure. A tragic newlywed accident. The media will devour it. Zola's small hands clenched into tight fists. At 6, she understood what death was. She had watched Grandma Hattie get weaker and weaker until the steady beeping of the machine beside her bed had turned into one long final note. But this was different. This was a plan. This was murder. The brake lines, Damien continued, pulling a set of tools from a black canvas bag. We'll cut them partially. They'll hold up for slow driving around the neighborhood, but the second he has to brake hard on that steep curve, boom, Amelia finished, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I drove the route yesterday. Julian is planning to take the car for one last spin tomorrow morning before the rehearsal. That curve is unforgiving. A wave of horror washed over Zola as she watched Damien crouch down by the Corvette's front wheel. These people were going to hurt Julian, kind Julian who talked to his cars like they were friends and brought Amelia coffee every morning. A small wrench slipped from Damien's grasp, clattering loudly against the concrete floor. Both conspirators froze. What was that? Damien hissed. Amelia paused, listening intently, then shrugged. Probably one of the neighbor's cats. They're always getting into things. As Damien went back to his deadly task, meticulously cutting the brake lines with surgical precision, Zola bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. She could hear Grandma Hattie's voice in her head. Sometimes, little bird, doing the right thing means being braver than you've ever been before. But how could someone so small possibly stop something so monstrous? When they finally departed, Zola crept toward the Corvette on trembling legs. Even in the dim security lighting, she could see the evidence of their work. A small, dark pool of fluid forming beneath the car like a puddle of tears. Tomorrow, Julian would take his final drive. Unable to leave without being seen, Zola remained frozen in her hiding spot as Amelia and Damien systematically crippled Julian's cherished automobile. The precision of their actions was terrifying. This was not random destruction. It was a carefully calculated execution. Pass me the smaller cutters, Amelia whispered, demonstrating a surprising familiarity with mechanics as she pointed to a specific section of the brake lines. We need to weaken this joint just enough. It needs to fail when he presses hard going down that incline. Damien worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed such a task before. The fluid will leak slowly at first, he explained. Then it will fail completely under pressure. It will look like a simple case of old equipment giving out. Zola watched in horrified silence as they siphoned brake fluid into sealed containers, then meticulously wiped away every trace of their presence. They were not amateurs. They moved like specters, leaving behind nothing but the invisible death trap they had set. I scoped out the route yesterday, Amelia continued, her voice humming with anticipation. Julian mentioned he wants to take it for a drive tomorrow morning, then head to O'Hare to pick up his best man. That stretch of road past the North Avenue bend has claimed 3 vehicles in the last decade. And the wedding? Damien asked, sealing the last of the containers. Amelia's smile was predatory. I'll be the devastated widow before I'm even officially a wife. The public sympathy will be overwhelming. The local news loves a tragedy. Successful tech mogul dies in a vintage car accident the day before his wedding. When they were finished, the Corvette looked exactly as it had before. Only a thorough inspection of the undercarriage would reveal the carefully orchestrated sabotage. Beautiful work, Amelia said, running her hand along the car's hood one last time. Julian always said this car was his pride and joy. How poetic that it will also be his coffin. After they left, Zola approached the Corvette on shaky legs. She knelt and saw where the fluid had dripped. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She remembered watching the mechanics at the garage near their old apartment building and how Grandma Hattie had explained that brakes were what kept cars from crashing. The sharp chemical scent of brake fluid filled her nostrils. She touched the small puddle with the tip of her finger, then quickly wiped it on her already grimy pants, afraid it might be poison. Looking up at the magnificent silver car, Zola whispered, "I'm sorry they hurt you." But tomorrow morning, Julian would climb into this beautiful, broken machine, completely unaware that his fiancée had just signed his death warrant. And Zola was the only person in the world who knew the truth. Dawn broke over Chicago with a cruel, breathtaking beauty, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet. Zola hadn't slept a wink, her mind a whirlwind of impossible choices. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Julian's kind face and heard Grandma Hattie's voice. Doing the right thing is rarely the easy thing, little bird. But what was the right thing for a homeless 6-year-old who was hiding illegally in a stranger's garage? Through the garage windows, she watched Julian and Amelia having breakfast on the terrace. Amelia was playing her part to perfection, the adoring fiancé feeding him a piece of melon, laughing at his jokes, adjusting his collar with a tender touch. The performance was so flawless it made Zola's stomach clench. "I can't wait to start our life together," Amelia said, her voice carrying clearly on the crisp morning air. "After your little joyride today, we'll be inseparable." Julian checked his watch. "Just a quick spin to make sure she's running perfectly. Then I have to get to O'Hare to pick up Ethan. He's been dying to see the Corvette since I told him about the restoration." Zola's heart hammered against her ribs. Julian planned to test the car in exactly 1 hour. Ethan, his best man, would be waiting at the airport, but Julian would never make it. He would be a wreck at the bottom of an embankment, while Amelia played the part of the grieving widow. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on her small shoulders like a physical burden. She thought about the social workers, about being taken away by strangers, about the group home Jamal had described in fearful whispers. Every instinct in her 6-year-old body screamed at her to run and hide. But then she remembered Julian's gentle voice as he talked to his car. She remembered how he had unknowingly provided her with warmth and shelter when she had nowhere else to turn. He had never even seen her, but his home had saved her life. Could she really stand by and let him die just to protect herself? Through the garage window, she saw Julian kiss Amelia goodbye and start walking toward the garage, the keys jingling in his hand. His face was alight with anticipation. He genuinely loved that car. He loved his fiancée. He loved the carefully constructed life he had built, a life that was set to end in less than 15 minutes if Zola remained hidden. With a surge of courage that would have made Grandma Hattie proud, Zola made her choice. She couldn't save herself by letting Julian die. Some things were more important than just being safe. Taking a deep breath that tasted of motor oil and cold morning air, she stepped out from behind the storage crates for the first time in over a week. Julian Croft bid farewell to Amelia with a tender kiss and headed for the garage, spinning the Corvette keys around his finger like a man without a single worry. The morning sun glinted off the metal, creating tiny dancing rainbows on the pristine driveway. Summoning every ounce of courage her small body held, Zola burst from the side garden and sprinted across the manicured lawn, her bare feet slipping on the dew-covered grass. Mister, don't get in your car," she yelled, her thin voice piercing the peaceful morning air like a siren. "The pretty lady, she broke it last night?" Julian froze mid-stride, utterly stunned by the small apparition racing toward him. A little girl with tangled braids, dressed in clothes that were clearly not her own, her eyes wide with a desperate urgency. On the terrace, Amelia's coffee cup slipped from her grasp, shattering against the stone with a sound like cracking bones. Dark liquid spread across the flagstones like a pool of blood. "Don't drive the silver car. They want to hurt you," Zola continued, stopping just out of his reach, but pointing a trembling finger directly at Amelia, who was now hurrying down the terrace steps, her face a mask of alarm. "Darling, who is this child?" Amelia's voice was pitched with perfect concern, but her eyes blazed with a barely suppressed fury. "We need to call security immediately. She's obviously a vagrant." Julian's business instincts, sharpened by years of reading people and situations, went into overdrive. The child's terror was undeniably real. No 6-year-old could fake that level of raw fear. But what was more unsettling was the flicker of panic in Amelia's eyes before her concerned expression snapped back into place. "They cut the lines under your pretty car," Zola pressed on, her voice shaking but resolute. "The man in dark clothes and the lady with the sharp fingernails. They said you'd crash at the scary curve." "This is absurd," Amelia snapped, her composure beginning to fray. "Julian, she's clearly mentally unstable. We need to call the authorities and have her removed." But Julian was studying Zola's face, seeing something there that made his blood run cold. This wasn't the incoherent rambling of a disturbed child. This was a testimony delivered with the chilling precision of a witness. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently, ignoring Amelia's increasingly frantic protests. "Zola Washington," she whispered, "and I've been living in your garage because it's warm, but your car isn't safe anymore. Please, sir, don't drive it." With steady hands, Julian pulled out his phone. "I'm calling 911, he announced, his voice calm but carrying a deadly seriousness. "I want the police and a mechanic here immediately." Amelia's face turned as white as snow. "They broke your silver car to make you crash," Zola insisted, maintaining her distance while pointing an accusatory finger at Amelia, who approached with a smile that was all teeth. "Sweetheart, someone clearly needs to call Child Protective Services," Amelia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "This poor little thing has obviously been living on the streets. She's probably hallucinating from hunger." Julian noticed how Amelia had positioned herself between him and the garage, subtly blocking his path to the Corvette. Her body language screamed defensiveness. "Julian, we can't possibly take the word of a homeless child who's been trespassing on our property," Amelia continued, her tone growing more urgent. She could be mentally ill or making up stories for attention. But Zola stood her ground, trembling but determined. "I saw them with the tools, the scary man named Damien, and the pretty lady who pretends to love you. They said $50 million when you die." The specificity of that number hit Julian like a physical blow. It was the value of his life insurance policy, information that only Amelia and his lawyer were privy to. His instincts, the same ones that had built a tech empire from a garage startup, were screaming danger. "I'm calling 911, he repeated, his thumb already dialing. "We'll let the professionals handle this." "Julian, please." Amelia's mask slipped further, revealing a desperate woman underneath. "Are you really going to trust some street urchin over your own fiancé after everything we've built?" "If there's nothing wrong with the car, then there's no harm in having it checked," Julian replied with the cool logic of a CEO, the phone already ringing in his ear. Amelia's face cycled through a series of emotions: panic, anger, and finally cold calculation. "You're embarrassing both of us. What will people think when they hear you called the police because a homeless child told you a ghost story?" But Julian was already speaking to the dispatcher. "I need police and a certified mechanic at 1509 North Astor Street immediately. I have reason to believe my vehicle has been sabotaged." The color drained from Amelia's face like water down a sink. In that moment, Zola saw something that frightened her more than hunger or cold ever had: the look of a cornered predator realizing its prey had just been warned. "You'll regret this, Julian," Amelia whispered, so quietly that only Zola heard the words. "Both of you." As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second, Zola edged nearer to Julian's protective form, sensing that the real danger was only just beginning. While they waited for the emergency services to arrive, the adrenaline that had fueled Zola's brave dash finally began to recede, leaving her shaking like a leaf in the autumn wind. The enormity of what she had done, revealing herself after nearly 2 weeks in hiding, crashed over her in terrifying waves. "I was so cold outside," she whispered to Julian, fully expecting to be punished. "Your garage was warm. I didn't take much food, I promise." Instead of anger, Julian's expression softened with a feeling Zola had rarely encountered, genuine compassion. "Sophia," he called to his housekeeper, who had appeared at the door, "please bring some hot chocolate and a blanket." Amelia watched this exchange with barely concealed rage. "Julian, you're encouraging a criminal. She's been stealing from us, trespassing. We should be pressing charges." "She's 6 years old, Amelia," Julian replied firmly, his protective instincts now fully roused. The police arrived within minutes, followed closely by Frank Miller, a master mechanic Julian had specifically requested. Detective Isabella Rossi, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with an air of no-nonsense authority, took immediate control of the scene. "Let's start with the vehicle," she announced, directing the mechanic toward the Corvette. Amelia made one last, desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Detective, this child is clearly disturbed. She's been living on our property, probably stealing—" "Ma'am, I will need to speak with everyone individually," Detective Rossi interrupted smoothly. "But first, let's see what Mr. Miller finds." The mechanic's inspection took less than 10 minutes. When he emerged from beneath the silver Corvette, his face was grim. "The brake lines have been deliberately severed," he announced to the silent group. "It's a professional job, designed to fail under stress. This car would have been a death trap." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. "There's more," Detective Rossi added, consulting her tablet. "Mr. Croft, your exterior security cameras were disabled last night, but the interior garage cameras remained active. We'll need to review that footage immediately." Amelia's face went from pale to ashen. "This is ridiculous. You're going to take the word of a homeless child and leap to these outrageous conclusions?" But Julian was no longer listening to her protests. He was staring at the woman he had intended to marry, seeing a complete stranger where his fiancée had once stood. "Detective Rossi," he said quietly, "I think you're going to find that footage very interesting." Amelia took an involuntary step backward, her perfectly crafted composure finally shattering like broken glass. The security footage from the garage played on Detective Rossi's tablet with devastating clarity. Amelia and Damien moved across the screen like actors in a silent, sinister film, their methodical sabotage captured in high-definition detail. "That's impossible," Amelia stammered, but her voice held no conviction. "Those cameras were supposed to be—" She caught herself, but it was too late. "Supposed to be what, Ms. Vance?" Detective Rossi asked, her pen poised above her notepad. Realizing her catastrophic error, Amelia made a desperate break for the door. 2 uniformed officers intercepted her before she reached the driveway, her expensive heels skidding on the polished concrete as she struggled futilely against their grip. "You don't understand," she shrieked, her composure completely gone. "I deserved everything he had. Do you have any idea what I went through to get this close?" Julian stood frozen, watching the woman he had planned to build a life with transform into someone utterly unrecognizable. The gentle fiancé who brought him coffee in the morning had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating monster. "Ms. Vance," Detective Rossi continued, "or should I say, Ms. Reed?" Amelia's struggles ceased instantly. "How did you—" "Veronica Reed," Rossi explained to Julian, who looked completely bewildered. "Wanted for questioning in connection with the suspicious death of Boston financier Victor Adler 3 years ago. Your fiancé has quite a history." The revelations came one after another, like hammer blows. Victor Adler had died in a convenient boating accident just 6 months after marrying Veronica Reed. She had collected over $2 million in life insurance before vanishing. Zola pressed closer to Julian, overwhelmed by the maelstrom of adult drama unfolding around her. She had saved Julian's life, but now the woman who had tried to kill him was staring directly at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You little brat," Amelia snarled, her mask of civility completely gone. You have no idea what you've cost me. Years of planning, months of playing the perfect girlfriend, all of it ruined by some homeless little pest." Detective Reesey stepped between them protectively. "Ms. Reed, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy, and we will be reopening the Adler case." As the officers led Amelia away, she twisted back toward Julian one final time. "You were never good enough for me anyway," she spat. "Just another lonely, rich man desperate to be loved." The garage fell silent, the only sound the distant wail of police cars driving away. Julian sank onto a nearby stool, the immense weight of betrayal and his near-death experience settling over him like a shroud. Zola approached him cautiously, her small hand resting on his arm. "I'm sorry the pretty lady was mean to you," she whispered. Julian looked down at the brave little girl who had saved his life, and for the first time in hours he managed a genuine smile. In the days that followed Amelia's arrest, the story exploded across Chicago's media landscape. Tech billionaire saved by homeless child became the dominant headline. But Julian canceled all interviews and public appearances. His priority wasn't managing the public narrative. It was ensuring Zola's safety and well-being. The mansion, once a sterile space designed to impress business partners, began to transform. Where minimalist furniture had created cold, perfect lines, Julian found himself adding warmth, soft blankets, books with colorful illustrations, and a small table where Zola could eat her meals without feeling dwarfed by the cavernous dining room. "I've never had pancakes that weren't from a box before," Zola admitted on her third morning, a smear of syrup on her chin as she enthusiastically attacked the stack Sophia had prepared. Julian watched her, fascinated. His carefully controlled life had operated with the precision of a Swiss watch for years. Board meetings, profit margins, strategic acquisitions. Now he was learning the beautiful chaos of childhood. He faced a barrage of questions that started before he'd finished his first cup of coffee, discovered small handprints on every glass surface, and grew accustomed to the constant background noise of someone who viewed the world with wonder instead of calculation. The investigation into Zola's circumstances revealed her tragic story. She had been orphaned when her grandmother, Hattie, died 3 months prior, and she had been evading social services ever since. Her grandmother had briefly lost custody years before due to a bureaucratic error, an experience that had left 6-year-old Zola with a deep-seated terror of being separated from the only family she had ever known. "The state has located a distant cousin in Texas," her caseworker, Maria Sanchez, explained during a meeting in Julian's study. "A Marcus Washington has expressed interest in taking custody." Julian's protective instincts flared. Has this man been vetted? Does he have any experience with children? "He's passed the initial background checks," Sanchez replied carefully, "but we always prioritize family placement when possible." That evening, Julian found Zola in the guest room, carefully folding her few belongings into the same plastic grocery bag she'd been carrying when she was hiding in his garage. "You don't have to pack yet," he said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The caseworker said it will be several weeks before any decisions are made." Zola looked up at him with eyes that held a wisdom far beyond her years. "It's okay, Mr. Julian. I knew I couldn't stay. Nobody keeps me for long." The quiet resignation in her voice shattered something inside Julian's chest. This brave little girl, who had risked everything to save a stranger, had learned to expect abandonment as a fundamental fact of life. "Zola," he said carefully, "what if there was another option? What if I applied to become your guardian?" Her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You'd want to keep me, even though I hid in your garage and ate your food?" "Especially because you were brave enough to save my life," Julian replied, surprised by the absolute certainty in his own voice. "If you'd like to stay here, I'd like for you to stay too." For the first time since he had met her, Zola's face broke into a radiant smile. "Really?" she beamed. And in that moment, Julian realized his meticulously planned life had just taken the most important and wonderful detour of his 42 years. 2 weeks after Amelia's arrest, the full scope of her deception began to unravel like a carefully woven tapestry being pulled apart thread by thread. Detective Rossi visited the mansion on a gray Thursday morning, her expression grim as she spread files across Julian's dining room table. "What we've uncovered about Veronica Reed is deeply disturbing," she began, opening a thick folder. "The Boston case was just the beginning. We've identified a pattern spanning nearly 8 years." Julian studied the photographs and documents while Zola colored quietly at the other end of the table. Her presence was a constant grounding reminder of how close he had come to becoming just another name in Veronica's file. The evidence painted a chilling portrait of calculated predation. 3 relationships with wealthy, unmarried men, Rossi continued. Victor Adler in Boston died in a boating accident 6 months after their wedding. Liam Grant in San Francisco fell from his yacht during what was reported as a romantic evening cruise. Evan Keller in Denver barely escaped when his sister became suspicious and hired a private investigator. Each case followed an identical, meticulous pattern. Veronica would meet her targets at charity events or exclusive social gatherings, present herself as a successful professional, engage in a whirlwind romance, and push for a quick engagement. The deaths, when they occurred, always appeared accidental and always happened shortly after substantial life insurance policies had been established. The frightening part, Rossi added, is how thoroughly she researched each target. She knew their business histories, their family dynamics, their personal vulnerabilities. This wasn't random. These men were hand-picked. Julian felt a chill as he remembered how perfectly Amelia had seemed to understand his interests, his loneliness, his deep-seated desire for a family. Every conversation, every shared secret, every intimate moment had been part of a calculated, manipulative performance. The media attention intensified as the investigation widened. News vans lined Astor Street, and reporters shouted questions whenever Julian left the house. Social media buzzed with speculation about the Black Widow of the Gold Coast. Julian hired additional security and had his attorney issue formal statements, but the circus continued unabated. More troubling than the public scrutiny was the private shame that was eroding Julian's confidence. How had someone so successful in business, someone who had built a tech empire by reading people and situations, been so completely and utterly fooled? "I pride myself on my judgment," he confided to his longtime friend and attorney, Ethan Cole, during a late-night conversation in his study. "I've negotiated billion-dollar deals, spotted corporate spies, identified dishonest competitors. How did I miss something this monumental right in my own home?" Ethan, who had flown in from New York the moment he heard the news, poured them both another scotch. "Because she was a professional, Julian. This was her entire career. You were looking for a partner, not analyzing a hostile takeover." The psychological impact went beyond wounded pride. Julian found himself questioning every interaction, every decision, every instinct that had once felt so reliable. Sleep became a luxury as his mind replayed moments with Amelia, endlessly searching for the signs he had missed, the warnings he had ignored. Meanwhile, Zola adapted to life in the mansion with the remarkable resilience of childhood, but her own trauma surfaced in unexpected ways. She hoarded snacks in her room, checked the locks on her door repeatedly before bed, and sometimes woke up screaming from nightmares about the pretty lady coming back for them. "She was so angry when they took her away," Zola whispered during one of these midnight episodes, clinging to Julian as he comforted her. "What if she gets out of jail and tries to hurt us?" These fears were not entirely unfounded. Veronica's attorney had requested bail, arguing that his client was not a flight risk. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, and the remote possibility of her temporary release added another layer of anxiety to an already stressful situation. The custody battle also grew more complex. Marcus Washington, the cousin from Texas, had begun calling regularly, his interest in taking in Zola seeming to grow with each new headline. During their video calls, he seemed pleasant enough, a middle-aged construction worker with no children of his own. But something about his sudden enthusiasm struck Julian as opportunistic. "The publicity has been significant," caseworker Maria Sanchez observed during another meeting. "A lot of people are suddenly very interested in Zola's welfare." The implication was clear. Some of that interest might be motivated by potential book deals or movie rights, rather than genuine concern for a traumatized child. As Julian tucked Zola into bed one evening, she looked up at him with those wise, worried eyes. "Mr. Julian, if the scary lady gets out of jail, will you still want to keep me, even if it's dangerous?" The question cut straight to his heart. Was he being selfish in trying to adopt her? Would she be safer with relatives far from Chicago, away from the media glare and the lingering shadow of Veronica's threats? But as he looked at this brave little girl who had risked everything for him, Julian knew his answer with absolute certainty. "Zola, nothing in this world could make me stop wanting you and my family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll face whatever comes next together." Outside, rain began to beat against the windows like tiny, insistent fists, and, somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed through the Chicago night,